Welcome back to Let's Talk Adoption. I am one of your hosts, Kim King, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming back social worker Linda Rotz back to the conversation here on Let's Talk Adoption. Linda, thank you for being back with us today on the
I'm so glad to
podcast.
see you again.
Yes, and for all the listeners, we are excited to have this conversation today, particularly around older child adoption. Now, if you're new to the Let's Talk Adoption podcast, be sure to subscribe. And also at letstalkadoption.com, you can actually write to us so you can suggest any ideas, give us feedback, comments, share how an episode hit differently maybe for you based on your personal connection to adoption. And just any feedback is always welcome. And you can do that at letstalkadoption.com. If you have a personal connection to adoption or are a person that works in the field of adoption, helping families, adoptees, placing parents, you are welcome to nominate yourself as a potential guest for Let's Talk Adoption, and we can explore that with you. But today, again, we are talking about older child adoption, and we've had Linda on for a couple of previous episodes, so we're excited to continue another conversation with Linda today. And it's really about older child adoption. I think that there is definitely a conversation that needs to be had about this because there are it's a very special kind of adoption versus adopting a newborn, right? People have different expectations and ideas of how this should go. There is the idea that there are thousands of children waiting to be adopted, and sometimes people think that welcoming an older child into the family through adoption is a very simple process, but actually there's a lot more to it. So that's why we thought this was a great topic today on Let's Talk Adoption. And Linda, tell me a little bit about why older child adoption is something important to discuss and learn about.
Well, I think that there are many families that actually consider the idea of adopting a child that's older, but they really don't know the nuances surrounding how you go about or what you're going to experience at the time that a child comes into your home. So some of the things that you might need to think about are like an older child usually comes with already established life histories. And, versus an infant who you're going to be building that life history from the beginning. An older child already has memories, the way they do things, the way they play, the way the way they're disciplined. I mean, those are things that they're already coming to you with that may be unfamiliar to you. So you need to be aware of that.
Mm-hmm. I love that you said it that way, because I do think that people still expect that a child will adapt easily or have a similar background. And it can be eye-opening to learn that's not always reality, that they can come from a very different home life and set of circumstances or even culture, right? Even within the U.S., all the melting pot of people we have here, if you are especially adopting transracially, where your child came from a family of a different race and now is assimilating into your family, of course, they're going to receive the culture and norms that you're going to teach them, but you also need to know about and be aware of their own family history too and incorporate that as much as you can.
Exactly.
So, Linda, I know older child, the term can be a little subjective. How would you define older child? What age is it? It's obviously not a newborn, but when does a baby infant adoption become older child adoption?
I would say anytime, over the age of 6 months. I mean, really and truly in the very beginning, babies bond. Babies bond in utero, and babies bond, the trauma of birth is actually a real thing. And so I would say, if it's, a child that maybe 3, 6 months, 8 months, a year, that's an older child. And because they have experienced something different before they go into your home.
Right. And I love that you mentioned that whether the child is born into their, of course, biological family and is parented by their biological family or is then adopted, that either way, birth is just trauma in general for humans because you're coming from this nice, cozy womb that's like the only universe you've ever known. And then suddenly you're literally thrust into the air and environment of the earth and subject to all the changing dynamics. Like, first of all, cold. Second, having to feel fabric, people, noises that were just once a muffled background, but mostly you just heard your mother's beating heart. And now these voices and these beeps and all the things in the hospital and the lights and people are
Mhm.
peering into your face and trying to see what's going on with you and assess
Mhm.
your reactions
Yes,
and
it's a real
behaviors.
thing. It's also a real
Yeah.
thing. If you think about it, it's like when they're in utero, there is a comfort. They do know their mom. They do know the sounds of, a lot of people, play music to the baby. A lot of people tell stories to the baby in utero. And, let's just, so all of the things that they're used to in the comfort of the womb, when they come out, and if it's not the same or similar or, familiar, it's trauma.
It's
It's
trauma,
something
right?
that somebody else is going to have to manage and
Hmm.
help them get through that.
Right. And I would say, just based on this conversation, and correct me if I'm wrong, but trauma is simply part of the human experience for everyone to some degree.
It's
Being
true.
born is your first trauma.
Mhm. And it's
Yeah.
really, it also can be educational
Yeah.
if you learn how to manage those things in life, then you're going to learn how to deal with a lot of things.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm. So there is a saying that there are so many children in need of loving homes. There are so many children that need to be adopted, languishing in the system, waiting to be adopted. I would say yes, there are thousands of children in need of loving homes. Maybe
mhm,
the need isn't for a permanent home, maybe it's for a foster home,
mhm,
while the local program, child welfare works to try to reunify the child with a biological family member, if not birth mom, birth father. But at some point, children can become able to be adopted. But what do you say to that? Well, we know there are so many thousands of children that need to be adopted. Is that is that true? Are there many waiting children already born that need to be adopted?
there are more children, there are more older children that are waiting than younger children. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just simply because the preferences of families who want to adopt are usually interested in adopting a younger child.
Right.
That's number one. Number two is oftentimes, let's just say a family is involved with the foster care system. The goal in foster care is always to reunify. That's the number one goal. Adoption is a goal, but it is not the goal. The goal is reunification. And so the birth family always has time to do what they need to do and show that they are able to effectively parent before the children come back. So there's a period of time where the children are aging and they're in foster care while the families are trying to um, reunify.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that's why they're older. There's more older waiting because by the time the foster care system decides that, okay, that's been enough time and we need to make another plan for your child, they're quite a bit older.
Mm-hmm.
So, so
Right. And sometimes when I've spoken with families that have adopted through the foster system, they share their previous adoption experience that perhaps they received placement as a foster parent of a
mhm,
child at a young age, infant, toddler, but then 3, 4 years went by before they were able to have the opportunity to pursue adoption because that
mhm,
path to reunification was something that they were all working toward. And when that path didn't end up being successful, then they wanted to, of course, continue parenting that child and adopt. And not every
mhm,
foster family wants to adopt. Sometimes they're just there to provide a home and support for a child temporarily, and that's what they feel is their calling. But many foster parents do end up, feeling that desire to adopt a child because, of course, they feel that connection and they have that heart
that's so
for
true.
that child. Hmm. And so the path is not simple because there are many things that can pop up that can prevent adoption, such as reunification, which, of course, as you're saying, is the goal. I think for most families listening to this podcast, their goal is adoption, right?
Mhm.
Um, Adopting an older child, the best, most common path to expect an older child as the outcome, that would be international or fostering, right?
Well, privately, they're still coming through. I mean, we get calls every day for older children situations or sibling groups. And,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to define like special needs groups, is what they fall into in that category. If they're older,
Mm-hmm.
if they're sibling group, um, not just exceptionalities or disabilities. Special
Mm-hmm.
needs includes race. It includes a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
um, those are the things that are considered when you're talking about older children,
Mm-hmm.
and and you need to understand that there are always going to be, I say exceptionalities, but I'm just going to say that there's always going to be challenges to overcome, and you need to educate yourself beforehand on what you think your family can handle,
Mm-hmm.
because love isn't the answer. It is a big part of it, but love doesn't heal, consistency, um, calmness, understanding the child from where the child came, all of those things, seeking help, therapy. Those are things that are going to help you get through. But to understand that, you need to understand that before you make the commitment of saying, yes, I really want to adopt an older child.
And Linda, for those listening who are hearing us use the term special needs, you had mentioned special needs and you had mentioned race could be considered a special need. Now, generally in private adoption, families are open to a variety of races and they don't consider that necessarily pursuing a special needs adoption, right?
Correct.
Right? So, in
Mhm.
what context would race be considered a special need?
So, in most states, it's African American and anything with African American. That would be the
So, like
race.
multiracial, if
And
African
now,
American is
yes,
one of the
and
race.
some
Okay.
states are now starting to turn toward different terminology,
Okay.
multiracial, multicultural, biracial in other races, along with African American or Caucasian or whatever. It's biracial. So
Hmm.
it really kind of depends on the state, but I think more states are leaning towards that different language.
Hmm.
Um, but the rest of it is the same.
Hmm.
Sibling groups, children over a certain age, um, special needs like physical disabilities, mental health disabilities, and all of those things. You don't like, I don't like putting a child in a category. It's hard for
Yeah.
me to do that. But in terms of working with, um, older children, you kind of have to understand what's going on with them. So then you do kind of have to filter them through some sort of like specialty, because you want to be able to get them the help that they need.
Hmm.
So it's important to know all of that.
I
And
see.
when you're adopting a child that is considered in one of those categories of special needs, you may have the ability to get subsidy, a federal subsidy or a state subsidy that can help assist with maybe some of the therapy, or maybe, I don't know, occupational therapy, physical therapy, um, emotional therapy. Those kind of things that money can assist in getting that for the child or
Which is
children.
wonderful because insurance, of course, the child, if you adopt or when you adopt, the child will be added to your insurance that you have, like through your employer. But any added financial assistance, I mean, those copays can be pretty big, especially for specialists.
Whether you're just starting to explore adoption or you've been on this path for a while, lifetimeadoption.com is a place you can turn for real support. From hopeful adoptive parents to women thinking about placing a child, there are resources for every step of the journey. Free webinars, real stories, and guidance from people who really care. No matter where you are in the process, you don't have to walk it alone. Visit lifetimeadoption.com to learn more.
Can people expect that if their child has special needs, whether they adopted the child through the foster system or adopted privately, can they expect that there could be assistance if their child does have some special needs?
There's an application process each state has, and sometimes it depends on the financial ability of the family. That could be part of the factors, but there's I don't know how they compute it. I'm just going to say, but
Right.
sometimes it's the financial means of the family, but it is also whatever the exceptionality is, and the severity of the exceptionality can maybe overlap that. So if somebody has certain finances, if there's a disability that is pretty severe, then that could jump over the fact that there's financial capability for a family. So there's a lot of documentation that happens. The request has to be made prior to finalization of the adoption, because after finalization, if you apply for any kind of special needs assistance, it would be Social Security. And
Okay,
you know,
that's a
that's
really good
mhm,
thing to
mhm,
inform families about, because that's
mhm.
something that if you didn't know any better, you might finalize and then learn about this benefit that you could have had. So can you explain that a little bit more or repeat
So
that a little bit?
yeah, so if there's an exceptionality, every state has the ability to provide subsidy to a child that is defined as special needs. But the application process is what determines whether or not you can receive it. So I always say, try it, see what you can get. If it's a no, well, then you tried. But in most circumstances, there's something,
Hmm.
that could help, and it is really for the child. In some states, it even includes college tuition.
Hmm.
In some states, it includes, let me see, medical, dental, college tuition, waivers for books,
Hmm.
for older children. There's a lot. Of course, there's the tax credit too, but there's a lot of other things that are provided to a child, um, or that may be provided to a child that you wouldn't think about. Not
Right.
just financial assistance to you, but a benefit to them.
And that adoptive parents who are on the path to finalization should start that application process before finalization if possible.
And usually, um, if it's a younger child, like under the age of 3, that may not be as easy. But if it's an older child, if it's a teenager, if it's a middle schooler, um, I would think that whomever you're working with to make that adoption possible would know that and would make sure that that is part of the process for you to at least try to apply.
I love that. I love that that just popped up in our conversation because I think that's such a gem, Linda. And then Linda also mentioned the tax credit. And so if you're new to adoption, there is a federal adoption tax credit that was made permanent many years ago so that families who have finalized an adoption can apply for a certain amount, which increases each year. So I won't list the exact amount, but currently it's approximately 17,000 and there's a phase out and it's with your tax liability and it can be carried forward for like a few years, like 5 years, I believe. So look into that. Never take tax advice from a podcast host, but we
Yes,
will link that
always
in the
always seek a
show notes.
professional.
Yeah,
Yeah.
seek professional tax help. I'm
Mhm.
here to just ask the questions about adoption, okay? But it's good to look into that because that can certainly play a role in um, your adoption financial planning, which is an important component of adoption, especially if you're not adopting through the foster system. But I also want to talk a little bit more about private adoption and older children. Adoptive parents, when they find out that there are birth mothers placing a child that's a little bit older, they often wonder, well, she's been parenting this child all along. Why now? Why would she choose adoption for an older child? So, without, of course, giving personal details, what are some examples of what that has looked like? Maybe with some, adoption scenarios that you've helped with.
I could think of a few. Yeah, there's a few. So I did an adoption for a sibling group of 4 in Florida, and the birth mother and father both had been in and out of the foster care system, and
Like themselves as children,
themselves, and then also with their own children. And they had just gone in and out so many times that their caseworker, their case just went to, you're going to have to terminate your parental rights kind of thing. And they came to us to make an adoption plan so they can choose a family, which they did. And another time I did another sibling group of 4. This one was in California, Colorado, they were in both states. And the mom was dying. And I don't remember how long it was, but she was desperate to make an adoption plan and to keep all of her children together, which she did. And that worked out good as well. And then there are other situations, scenarios where moms are just like, I'm a single mom. I never expected to be a single mom, and I'm struggling and I'm not getting help. And, the first thing that we always say is, do you have a family member that can help you? What are your, resources where you live? Like, what about your church? I mean, we always try to work on ways to make them feel like they can make a successful plan moving forward. But if they can't, then we try to help them understand that the next step they're choosing is also going to be a successful plan for the future of their children, so that no one is going away feeling like they didn't do right by their children. So, it's choices that you make for your child. And how much more loving can that be? We say that all the time, but it happens. And when we're working with women that are making those choices, we're always trying to figure out, okay, can they do it? Is this just a knee-jerk reaction to a bad situation? Or is this truly something that needs to happen? And then once that's established, then we help her walk through that. But also, we have to find a family that can meet the needs of the situation, whether it be a single child, a sibling group, whatever, older, a little bit younger. That's the whole point of working with older children, is looking for a family that can meet the needs of that child. And it takes a special family to do that.
Absolutely. And I think back to what you were saying about helping a woman explore her resources for parenting. Because the last thing that most people don't want to see a woman make a permanent decision, such as permanently relinquishing a child or children because of temporary circumstances, where just like a domino effect led to this moment where she's calling in asking for adoption assistance. But maybe if she could just get some stable housing, maybe if she can get established with government assistance, maybe she just needs a little guidance from a local boots on the ground organization that helps moms that are in tough spots get connected to resources. Maybe she needs to get linked up with a family in a church that provides some respite care for single mom, like babysitting,
Yes, yes. I
Yeah,
mean,
maybe she just needs
there's so
a
many
night
things.
off,
Yes,
day off. Yeah.
yes,
But really, I would say with adoption, especially for older children, it's something that usually has been kind of brewing over a period of time. And then something happens where it is the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak.
mhm,
And she just has to make the call and start asking the questions. What is it like? What does it take? And how can I do this? What are my next steps? And sometimes when they make that call, they're ready and needing a placement right away, especially in
correct.
private adoption, because it truly is an impossible situation for her. And writing her a check for $30,000 is not going to fix the problem for her.
No,
She's wanting a different life than what she's able to provide, and that's more than just financially. Because in the US, usually people can get connected to financial assistance and maybe still be in survival mode, but they know that they have food and they know that they have shelter and they have medical care. They have the bare essentials because that's provided by all the programs we have and the tax dollars. And ideally, they're getting linked into those things, and ideally, those things are available, right?
correct.
But it's more than that for women who choose adoption for an older child. And it's not always the birth mom, it can be the grandparents that have the legal right to this child and they just can't do it anymore. Or maybe they're getting older, one of them is sick, and maybe they thought it would just be for a short period of time. I know the team I work with at Lifetime
Yes,
Adoption has had scenarios like that
yes, we
where
have.
both sets of grandparents were looking for a family together
Mhm.
for older child adoption. So there can, I would say, just leave the expectation open as to why, and don't get set on a certain story that, oh, it's always a mom that she was sick and she couldn't take care of them anymore, or any specific narrative. Don't get married to a narrative. Just understand that, there's a lot more to older child adoption, and it does take the right family, like you were saying, Linda. So shed a little more light on that. What does that mean? Like, what's a scenario? Again, of course, as a social worker, you're never going to give too much information or detail about a specific case, but give us an example of, you know, a situation, a circumstance that had certain special needs per se, not medical special needs, but where you were trying to find the right family, whether it was, recently or many years ago because you've been working for many years in adoption
Mhm.
through the foster system and now the private sector. But what does that look like when you are trying to find the right family that can truly meet the needs of a child, especially an older child?
So the very first thing that we do is get as much information on the child as we can. We need to know everything that's going on. We need to know from where they came. Did they live in multiple homes in foster care, or did they live in multiple homes within the family? Was mom living in a motel? We need to know what circumstances that child experienced. And then we go to there's other factors that we move on with. One is, we make sure that mom is able to tell the child, what's going to happen and prepare that child. It's part of her job to prepare that child for what's coming next. And so those are big parts of the scenario of trying to find a home for a child. The next component is finding a family that has all of the skills that can work with that particular child based on what we were able to tell them about that child. So what I'm suggesting is that every family, if they're considering making an adoption plan for an older child, is to educate themselves on what they're willing to work work with, what they need to understand. Every child, comes with a little bit of trauma, a lot of grief, a lot of understanding of how a household is run from where they came, right? And then they're moving into a new household and they don't know what the rules are. They don't know what the boundaries are. They don't know what the love connection is. And, when they're coming into a situation like that, you may experience behaviors because they don't know how to act because it's not familiar to them and they don't know how to express what they're feeling. So there's a lot of education that is provided along the way. There's also what we call a transition plan, where, you get to know the child and you get to, have that child transition into your family. If you have other children in your family or biological children, there's the little education process with that. There's also we need to make sure that those children are accepting of the same feelings that you have about bringing another child into the home. So there's a lot to consider, but when you educate yourself on what you're thinking about doing, and if you decide to move forward and you're talking to a home study writer, your home study writer is going to guide you in the right direction to get you the education piece that you need in order to, articulate what types of scenarios that you can handle. And you have to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest with yourself. Oh, I think I can do that. No. You have to be pretty sure that you can go the distance, because whenever you bring a child into the home that's a little bit older, there's a transition into the home, but there's a transition once they're there.
Right.
We call it the honeymoon period. Everything is great. And then all of a sudden, boom, it's not so great anymore. And then, but it's all about observe, see what's going on, and then seek out the assistance that you need to see how you can handle that.
Describe the honeymoon period. How do we know it's still the honeymoon period when it comes to adoption and welcoming that child into the family? You were really excited to adopt, of course.
You just have to observe, because once they come into the home, they're either going to be shy or they're going to be super excited, and they're going to be on their best behavior. They're going to listen to what you're saying, all of that. And then there's going to come a period of time where they've become a little familiar with your stuff, right? and then it's like, well, wait a minute, I don't want to do that. There's a little bit of backtracking. Well, it wasn't like that in the last house that I was in, so I don't like that. And so then there may be behaviors. But I would say a lot of the time the behaviors are there because they don't know how to articulate how they're feeling. And so they act out in different ways to get the attention that they need, but they still don't know how to articulate it. So the trick is to really figure that out and not be reactive to their reactions. You look at it, you observe it. If you don't know how to handle it, you seek out the help with a professional. And there are a lot of trauma-informed therapists out there that specialize in older children in foster care, children transitioning into different homes, and they're invaluable. They really are.
Yes, I love that you brought that up, because any, adoption professional assisting a family who's hoping to adopt a child that's older, or who is including that age bracket, not just newborn, but hey, we'd be willing to adopt up to a 10-year-old. I think it's, important that adoption professional inform the future adoptive parents that you are going to need to have a therapist. You are going to need to provide therapy for that child or children and participate in that as a family, not just the child being dropped off at an appointment and you sitting in the waiting room, but mom and dad both participating, and even maybe siblings participating. So one-on-one therapy, as well as the whole family being involved in learning how to best support that child, and also make sure that every family member is getting the support they need, especially in those early stages of that transition through the honeymoon phase, and then also through that next phase where I imagine it's kind of like, in theory, and tell me if this is a good theory or not, Linda, because you're the social worker and you're the one with over a decade of experience just in the foster system before you came to private adoption. But I feel like there's sort of this testing phase, like, when are you going to give up on me? When are they going to move me somewhere else? When am I not going to be good
Exactly.
enough? And this
Exactly.
is the acting out.
Mhm.
And this, what I'm referring to is more than just, I don't really understand the rules and this is a hard transition for me. But this is a, nobody has stuck through
Stuck with
with
me.
me. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That does happen a lot. And it all, the other thing that happens is they're, without articulating or saying it, is I don't deserve this
Hmm.
and I don't want to be adopted. So they put up this barrier that I don't want to be adopted, right? Because they're afraid of exactly what you're talking about. And that's a that's a hard brick to move. You
Yeah.
know, but it is movable. You just have to be consistent. You just have to be non-reactive. You just have to be reassuring. And, eventually it works out and it's great. And just so you know, I was reading something the other day. It was an article, it was an adoption article about adopting older children. And um what it said was that most older children who are adopted, some go into it excited because they want to be adopted, and then there's still behaviors. And some go into it apprehensive because they don't know what to expect. And some don't want to go into it, and they're resistant. But all older children that have been adopted, of all the older children that have been adopted, about 95% of those children are happy that they were.
Hmm.
And they have experienced a good lifestyle and a turnaround, but sometimes it takes a little bit.
And I feel like part of that can come from just an innate loyalty to the one who gave birth to you.
Yeah.
An innate loyalty to the only family you knew, perhaps, before this adoption transition happened.
Yes.
Um, and so it can be like a reticence toward letting anyone else take the place of their birth mother.
But an ex uh, a good family who adopts an older child um, will never put the birth mother in a bad light.
Mm. Hmm.
Will always speak of the birth mother in a positive way, even if the birth mother and birth father, if they have made life choices that you wouldn't make, you don't know what the circumstances are. Don't judge.
Hmm.
And the more you judge situations like that, they'll hear that. So even if you're not talking about mom, and mom has the same problem as some situation that you're talking about, let's just say, she's addicted, and she has not been able to be in recovery, and, you are talking about somebody who's an addict, that resonates to that child that's sitting next to you because they know a little bit about their mom. And if you're saying something that is derogatory or sounds derogatory about somebody that is in that position with that disease, they're going to feel that. You really
Hmm.
have to be genuinely okay and not just non-judgmental and hopeful. Okay, if she is, we're hopeful that she's going to get better,
Hmm.
but she's a good person and she did a really good thing by placing you with us, and we are so grateful.
Hmm. Right. And I love that you shared that statistic that the overwhelming majority, nearly 100% of adoptees, are so glad. They think positively about the
Mhm.
fact that they were adopted. And I think that is very heartwarming too to the parents that
Mhm.
adopted them, because there is a fear that
Mhm.
I'm going to adopt a child, especially an older child who wants to run away from me, be back with their biological,
Mhm.
family. And that is definitely, something that could run through the mind of an adoptee. It doesn't mean they'll act on it, but it could be something that they're working through as they transition and grieve and accept the reality that an adoption has taken place.
So you made me think of something else. So oftentimes, like I'm on Facebook and I see things, and there are groups out there, and there are groups of adoptees that are against being adopted, and you have to, like, if whenever I see one of those, I want to know the backstory.
Hmm. Yeah.
What the backstory is, and oftentimes the backstory is um, the mother was not respected, or um, they didn't know where their mother was, because in foster care, sometimes the mom doesn't have a choice and there's no open adoption situation. And that's the other piece. When a child is brought up in an open adoption situation where you're openly discussing the fact that you've been adopted and that we chose you and that mom made a positive adoption plan for you, it is much healthier than not knowing anything and wondering. And so a lot of those adoptees either didn't know, or they were adopted into a family that didn't embrace that.
Hmm.
And so then they didn't feel that,
Hmm.
there was actually like a love connection in some way.
And that
So,
can be really common too with specific decades of adoption with international, more
mhm,
recent than, yeah, not necessarily people who were adopted in the 60s, but people who were adopted in like the 80s and 90s and beyond. There's like a group of international adoptees that really think that it was wrong that they were taken from their original country of birth and robbed of their language, robbed
mhm,
of their culture, robbed of their family ties, and placed into a country like the US
mhm,
and expected to just grow up as all American, right?
mhm. Yep.
Um, and so there is a big conversation with that as well. And a lot of countries have actually slowed down their international adoptions too for similar reasons, although deeper reasons too. Although, feeling like you were stripped of your natural language and culture is a big one, I think.
You know, there's so many different cultures that we could be embracing and learning from and loving. And actually, if we're adopting a child of another race, you know learn about that culture, teach about that culture, because if we don't do that, what's going to happen?
Mm.
Everybody's going to blend and there will be no differences. And those are the things that are so fun
Yeah.
to me, is understanding everybody's differences makes me a better person. And I would hope that other people would feel the same way. You learn from everyone,
It's
you know?
true. And also on the flip side, sometimes adoptees, especially in the US, they go through phases. I was stripped of my culture and my language, but also I just want to be like everyone else. I don't want to be
Mm.
identified as the one who came from X country or the one who got adopted when they were older or the one that was in the foster system. Like they just want to like blend in and be as normal as possible. And they can kind of flip back and forth in which part of themselves they are embracing at any given time.
But that's all about labeling.
Ah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
If we just stop doing that
Mm,
and just embracing who people are
mm-hmm.
and what they bring and the love they bring, you know, that's what I hope for
Yeah.
all the time. That's what I hope for all the time. I don't like labeling, and judging. Judging is hard. Um, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I always wear a locket that I've worn ever since I started in foster care, 30 years, 20 some years ago. But the
When you were
locket
5.
is it's a little locket. It's a little Brighton locket. And it's a little book, and it says, if you judge people, you have no time to love them.
Mm,
And it was
yeah.
spoken by Mother Teresa. And so I wore that every day when I was in foster, every day, to remind myself that, everyone's human, everyone has a different path, and we need to just see the light in each one's path and try to embrace that.
Mm-hmm. That is such a good point. I love that you shared that. If we're so busy judging people, it's like squeezing out any margin for actually loving and accepting them. And that's just the human condition. We just want to be accepted,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because acceptance in our history just meant living, surviving. We needed to be accepted. And, a lot of the behaviors that we see stem from just that desire to be accepted, and also that feeling that you're not accepted and you're just surviving.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be part of a birth mother's story too, that she never solved that equation.
Mm-hmm.
And so her situation has been really rough trying to be a good mom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when a child moves into a home, the main thing is it's just like, don't give up.
Mm-hmm.
The minute you show signs that you're giving up on them, they're going to be like, see,
Mm-hmm.
Even at 3, that paves the way for the next situation that may not work. So that's why it's so important to do the preparation ahead of time and be honest with yourself about what you can handle and what you can't. I'll never forget, I had a family, in fact, they're very good friends of ours, and they had 4 daughters, and one of the daughters was one of my daughters, very good friends. And when they were raised, the mom came to me and said, we want to adopt. We want to adopt a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, Debbie, you're like 50 some years old. You've raised all your daughters. They're out of the house. Are you sure you want to raise from a baby? And her husband was like, are you sure? He said, you go through all the classes that Linda, there's a 30-hour class that I had to teach in foster care. And if you go through that class and you still want to do it, then I'll go through that class with you the second time. So she had to go through it twice, and they did adopt, and they wound up adopting an older child because then they learned, what they needed to learn about taking in an older child. So they did adopt an older child, and about 2 years later, they adopted the sibling of that child.
Oh.
That's pretty awesome, but
Yeah.
You really just need to get educated.
Mm-hmm. I love that you mentioned 30 hours of training to prepare, because I was going to ask you what that looks like. People want to know, well, is it what is it? A book I read, a YouTube video I watch? But it's actually a syllabus, right? That you go through.
So, I mean, if you're going through foster care or, some agencies, there's a usually in foster care, there's maybe 10 families that will take this course over a period of time, but equals 30 hours. And yes, there's a syllabus, and yes, there's a book, and yes, there are tests, and yes, there's role playing, and yes, we have speakers come in, and all of that. So that's important. And in private adoptions, you can do a lot of self-education. And if you're going to get a home study, then your home study writer is going to give you education. Here at Lifetime, I require 21 hours for a family to understand a little bit about adoption. And a lot of it is understanding the legal part of it. But if their preferences are unusual, or, where I think they need to get educated, or I want to make sure that they understand what they're getting into, then I will make recommendations of some other classes that they could take, and also do it privately, like me and you kind of thing. And yeah, and it's important. And I think any agency that places a child has the responsibility to make sure that the family can meet the needs of the child that is being placed.
Agreed. Yeah. Because there are some risks that it might not work out. And then, like you said before, an even more challenging transition for the next family. Because if it doesn't work out with that initial placement, there must be another placement.
Mhm.
That's just the way it has to go,
It has
right?
to go.
And
Hmm.
it's going to be even harder for the
Hmm.
child. Yeah. So be prepared because you are stewarding this opportunity to have a placement of this older child. You are stewarding this, and your preparation and your understanding and your acceptance, your maturity, your patience, your calm persona when interacting with the child. If you have those, you're stewarding well. But if those are missing, there's a chance you might not steward it well, and it could cause more harm than good for that child. So very
But
important to be prepared.
and I just want to say to
Yeah.
understand what your strengths are and
Mm,
what you think that you can handle is a strength.
yes.
If you educate yourself and say, I don't think I can do that,
Hmm.
that's totally fine.
It's okay,
That
right?
means that, the child that gets placed in your home is going to be the right fit. And we're
Mhm.
not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole kind of thing.
And it doesn't mean that just because you have a bad day that you're causing harm to a child,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You just want to have eventually start having more good days than bad, right?
Hmm. And they do
Have,
come. I
yeah.
promise they do.
Hmm.
Sometimes it takes a little longer, in some families than other families. Sometimes, you might have issues with the siblings that are in the home. Even though they're okay with it, uh, there's a transition there too.
Hmm.
So, but I tell you, if you stick it out, it, it does work. And if you get the right help,
Hmm.
it does work. So
Yeah. Well, I think we've done a good job of dispelling one of those myths about older child adoption that it will be easy.
yeah,
I want to do another episode with you, Linda, where maybe in the next episode we can talk about more of the myths versus reality, maybe talk about maybe a little bit of trauma basics, and maybe a few more things that we can talk about when it comes to older child adoption, because there's just so much more to unpack. We're scratching the surface here, really. I mean, we've
for
gone
sure.
deep in a couple of areas, but I hope that this episode has been helpful for you and that you appreciate, real talk when it comes to older child adoption. It's not going to be always just smooth sailing, picture perfect cookie cutter family. A child just fits the mold that you had in your heart, that little place in your heart that you had for a child. The child just comes in and just transitions perfectly. Nobody needs therapy. Nobody has a bad day. you
Hmm.
know this is reality, and this is a big transition for everyone. And so, Linda, thank you for being with me. We're going to continue the conversation in our next episode. And Linda, anything else you wanted to say at the moment for families while they wait for the next episode?
The only thing that I want to say is I hope this didn't dispel anyone
Yeah,
into, thinking that it is impossible, because it is
right.
not impossible. Nothing's impossible as long as you understand what you're doing. So understanding creates change. So keep that in mind and just keep yourself educated if you're thinking about working with older children
Hmm.
and an adoption plan,
I love
because
that
it is
you
lovely.
I love that you brought that back around to, understanding the reality and what you're up for, but also how rewarding it can be for both parties, the child and the adoptive parents. That it's not necessarily why you're adopting a child to be rewarded, but because you feel the calling and you feel that you could serve a purpose in the life of a child, and you could, change that child's life for the good, and that you have the heart to do that. You have the willingness to do the homework
Mhm.
and the preparation and to have the patience. And so, yeah, I think just circling back around to that statistic that children overall are so happy and thankful that they were adopted, that they see it positively.
Mhm. Yep.
Especially as older children. An infant's probably not going to be like, well, I'm thankful I was adopted. I mean, this is the only family I've ever known.
Yeah.
Your baby isn't probably going to say anything like that.
No.
But an older child, I think, has a deeper appreciation for the life they had in the past versus, the life that they have now, and understanding of that. So let's pick it back up in the next episode. Thank you again for listening to Let's Talk Adoption, and be sure to write to us with any feedback and questions and show suggestions. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. You can catch all of our episodes at letstalkadoption.com, also on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcasts, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for joining us on Let's Talk Adoption. If you'd like to learn more about today's episode, please visit letstalkadoption.com. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss a conversation. Until next time, take care and God bless.